The road had been dry for weeks. Not dry in the way of sand or dust, but dry like silence. The kind that settles over everything and leaves a man aware of every scrape of his sandals, every creak of the leather straps on his pack, every hollow echo inside his chest. He had been walking alone long enough that the rhythm of his steps had become the only company he trusted. Villages lay far behind him, their clay houses shrinking in memory, and the desert hills had given him no sign of people for many days. At times, he thought perhaps he had already left the world of men behind, stepping into some space between stories, where the land simply stretched and the sky simply burned and nothing more could be asked of. It was during such a day when the horizon was nothing but haze, and the sun had scorched the air into trembling bands, that he saw it. At first, it seemed no more than another dark line above the wavering hills. He had seen many ridges before, worn down by centuries of wind, shaped like teeth biting against the sky. He almost looked away, but this one refused to be dismissed. It stood heavier, as though the earth had piled itself upward with intention, not accident, and stranger still, it did not rise straight and proud like the mountains of the north. No, this one seemed to lean, its crest bent forward, casting a shadow even from so far away, as if it stooped over the land to study whoever walked below. The pilgrim slowed his pace. His throat was dry, but the dryness no longer came from thirst. Alone, he felt the weight of being seen. He adjusted the strap of his pack, shook the dust from his cloak, and tried to remind himself of reason. A mountain is only stone. It does not lean. It does not bend. And it does not watch. Yet every few steps, his eyes lifted again. The outline had not changed, and still it gave the impression of a shape waiting in silence. The sun dropped lower, and the world of heat softened into copper and violet. Shadows stretched long across the plain. The pilgrim made camp in the shelter of a broken ridge, building a small fire from brittle twigs and roots he had gathered earlier. He sat cross-legged, hands cupped around the flame, but he found no comfort in its warmth, because across the firelight, framed against the darkening horizon, the mountain was still there, and in the quiet crackle of the fire, he thought he could hear something else. Not loud, not clear, but faint, like the slow intake of breath. He stilled, leaning slightly to listen. The wind should have carried the desert's usual chorus, the whisper of grains shifting, the soft rattle of dry brush, perhaps the distant call of a night bird. Instead, there was only that slow rhythm, steady and patient, as if the land itself was alive. He told himself it was only his mind. Long solitude make strange companions of silence. He drew his cloak tighter, closed his eyes, and forced himself into restless sleep. But even in dreams, the sound followed him. Stone breathing in the dark, asterisk, the morning rose without birdsong. That was the first thing he noticed when he opened his eyes to the ashen light. Normally, dawn in the desert carried at least some life. The scrape of beetles on stone, the crack of dry stalks shifting, the faint call of scavenger birds overhead. But now the air hung still, heavy with absence. His fire had long since burned itself into a shallow cradle of gray. He pushed himself up slowly, brushing the dust from his cloak, and looked toward the horizon. The mountain remained. It had not lessened in the night, nor grown fainter in the dawn. If anything, it seemed clearer now, outlined against a pale sky. Its crest bent forward as before, leaning toward the earth, unchanging and yet undeniably present. The pilgrim chewed a piece of dried root from his satchel, but the taste was hollow. His stomach turned with unease, though he was not ill. It was the silence, he realized, a silence that did not feel empty, but watchful. He tried to walk away from it. That morning, he adjusted his path deliberately, angling south toward the dry ridges instead of east toward the mountain. The ground sloped gently. The trail cracked with old rivulets from rains that had not come in years. His sandals kicked dust, leaving faint marks that the wind should have erased. But no wind came by midday. Sweat traced slow lines down his back, soaking the fabric of his cloak. The heat shimmered upward in restless waves, yet still the air gave him no relief. When he finally allowed himself to glance north again, his breath caught. The mountain had followed him. No matter how far he walked sideways, it remained in sight. A heavy shadow, unyielding, always there, waiting. His steps faltered. He wiped the sweat from his brow, mouth dry, and stared. Was it closer? The thought clung to him, unwelcome but persistent. Its slope seemed sharper now, its edges more defined. He felt a strange tightening in his chest, as though an invisible rope had been knotted there. He pressed a hand against his sternum, willing the sensation to ease, but the pressure remained. That night, he built no fire. He lay upon the stones, staring up at a sky washed pale with stars. The moon drifted high, silver against the silence, and the desert around him was still. Too still when sleep finally took him. His dreams were heavy with sound. He dreamed of a cavern, vast and hollow, where the air moved like the slow rhythm of lungs. He heard a deep thrum, steady and endless, echoing through the stone. His hands touched the walls and felt them warm beneath his palms, as if veins of heat ran just under the surface. And in the shadows, he saw eyes. Not human eyes, Not the glimmer of any beast he knew, but something older, patient, endless, unblinking. He woke with his chest tight and his throat raw. The memory of that heartbeat still pounding through his ears. When he looked toward the horizon, the mountain was there again. And this time, there was no question. It was closer, by the third day. He stopped fighting it. Every step south or west, every careful turn meant to pull him away, only left him with the same result. The mountain lingering on the horizon, dark against the pale sky. And each time he tried to resist, the invisible knot in his chest pulled tighter, making his breath short and uneasy. So he gave in, not with eagerness, but with a weary acceptance of a man who realizes that a river will not stop for his hand. He adjusted the strap on his satchel, leaned on his walking staff, and turned his path straight toward it. The land changed as he did. The ridges fell away, replaced by long, sloping plains that seemed to guide him like channels carved for water. The soil grew darker, richer, though nothing sprouted. The stones underfoot no longer crumbled, but lay smooth and solid, as though polished by centuries of hidden purpose. By afternoon, the air itself grew strange. The desert should have carried heat that shimmered and swayed, but here, the warmth was even, steady, almost too steady. And with that steadiness came the silence again. Not the empty hush of loneliness, but a silence that pressed, that carried weight. When he reached the edge of the valley, he stopped. The mountain rose before him in full. It was larger now, far larger than he had imagined. Its body stretched wide across the horizon, shoulders of stone folded into shadow. The peak bent forward in its eternal stoop. Up close, it no longer looked like land. It looked like a figure seated, watching, waiting. And the valley itself, it was wrong. No wind stirred there. He stood at the rim, and the air around him was utterly still. The loose threads of his cloak did not shift. Dust at his feet lay untouched. Even his own breath felt too loud, as if each exhale might disturb something vast and unseen. He took a cautious step downward. The valley floor was smoother than it should have been, stone shaped into broad flats, like the floor of a hall. In places, great cracks split the surface wide enough to reveal depths where faint warmth rose. He crouched near one and laid his palm along the edge. It pulsed. Not a trick of blood in his hand, not his imagination. A slow, steady thrum deep within the rock. The rhythm of something alive. He pulled back sharply, heart racing, and wiped his hand against his cloak as though to rid himself of the feeling. But the warmth lingered in his palm, sinking deep into the flesh. Dusk fell as he crossed deeper into the valley. The world turned violet. Shadows growing long. Until the mountain loomed, not as a shape on the horizon, but as a vast presence at his side. It towered above, leaning forward, still, its ridges cut sharp against the fading light. He made no fire that night. To light a flame here felt like speaking out of turn, like shouting in a temple. Instead, he lay against the stone and stared upward. The stars burned clear above, yet he found no comfort in them. For though the sky stretched wide and infinite, his eyes kept being drawn back to the dark mass beside him, that bent crest, those shadowed ridges, that unyielding posture of waiting. And as he drifted toward uneasy sleep, he felt certain of one thing. The mountain knew he was here, knew he was here. The pilgrim rose at dawn, though dawn hardly felt like dawn within the valley. The light entered sluggishly, as though the sky itself hesitated to pour brightness here. Shadows clung to the stone longer than they should have, and even as the sun climbed, the valley floor held its dimness, a half-light that seemed older than morning itself. He drank the last of his water and adjusted the strap of his satchel, gaze fixed on the leaning crest above him. For hours, it had been only presence and silence, but today, something inside him urged forward. His legs felt restless, carrying him toward the base without his command, as though the mountain had already taken hold of his path. The stone surface grew stranger as he walked. Some slabs bore lines, not cracks, but deliberate markings, long, curving strokes, shallowly cut, following no pattern he knew. He ran his fingers across one, and the groove hummed faintly beneath his touch. Not sound exactly, but vibration, as though the stone remembered the chisel that carved it by midday. He reached the first hollow. It gaped at the mountain's base like an open mouth, wide and dark. From a distance, it could have been mistaken for shadow, but up close, the arch was unmistakable, smooth, shaped, formed by more than wind or time. Its edges curved evenly, and the floor sloped inward like a road, inviting passage. The pilgrim stopped at its threshold. Cool air breathed from the hollow, carrying a scent not of earth or dust, but something faintly metallic, like iron struck in a forge. It chilled his skin, though the sun still burned behind him. He set his hand against the entrance wall. The stone there was warm, alive with that same deep thrum he had felt in the valley cracks. His heart pounded. He thought of turning back, yet the invisible knot in his chest pulled tighter, drawing him inward. He took a single step, then another, his sandals whispering against stone, polished, smooth by passage. Inside, the silence deepened. It was not emptiness. It was not the absence of sound. It was silence so thick it pressed against him, filled his ears, settled into his very bones. Each breath seemed loud, each heartbeat intrusive. The passage stretched ahead, fading into darkness. He touched the wall, tracing its curve as he walked. Shapes appeared faintly in the dimness, more of those carved lines flowing across the stone-like veins. Some intersected, some spiraled, forming patterns that flickered at the edge of comprehension. He paused to study one more closely. The grooves shimmered faintly, catching what little light existed, and in the stillness, he thought he heard them whisper. Not words exactly, but the suggestion of voices, low and distant, echoing from some deep chamber far below. The hairs on his neck rose. He pulled his hand back, and the sound vanished. Deeper still he went, until the light behind him shrank to nothing. Darkness pressed on every side, but strangely, he was not blind. The stone itself seemed to glow faintly, as though the carvings along its walls bled a pale light, guiding his steps, and with every step, the rhythm beneath his feet grew stronger. The slow, steady pulse of the mountain's heart. When he finally stopped to rest, leaning against the wall, he closed his eyes, and in the darkness, he knew he was no longer walking into the mountain. The mountain was drawing him in. Asterisk. The pilgrim lost track of how long he had been inside. Time thinned in those tunnels. His steps no longer matched the rhythm of a day. There was no sky above to measure light, no shadows to shift, only the endless hum of stone beneath his soles. His breath slowed until it matched the mountain's pulse, and in that cadence, he forgot the span of hours. The corridor widened. The faint glow of carvings grew stronger, leading him into a chamber vast enough to swallow his every sound. He paused at the threshold. The ceiling rose high above, lost in shadows. The walls curved outward like the inside of a colossal dome, their surfaces alive with etched spirals, circles, and lines that wound together in patterns so intricate they seemed to move if stared at too long. And in the center of the chamber lay an altar of stone. It was no crude block. Its surface was smooth, edges sharp, the kind of cut only made by steady hands and knowledge older than memory. Upon it rested nothing, no relic, no offering, only emptiness, as though what it once held had long been carried away. The pilgrim stepped closer. The moment his foot touched the chamber floor, the air trembled. A sound rose, deep and low, rolling through the dome like thunder buried in earth. He froze, hands tightening at his sides. The sound built not from outside, but from within the walls, as though the stone itself were speaking. Whispers filled the chamber, not one, but many. They overlapped, 1,000 threads, weaving together, too faint to grasp, yet heavy with meaning. He could not catch words, only the weight of them, voices from long ago, or perhaps not yet born. Echoing at once, he pressed his palms to his ears. But the sound did not lessen. It was not carried by air. It lived inside his bones, rattling his teeth, vibrating through his chest. His knees buckled, and he fell before the altar. The whispers surged, and in their tide, images struck his mind, flashes of people long dead, faces carved by toil and grief, eyes lifted to the sky as though seeking mercy. He saw fields of fire sweeping across valleys, towers of smoke curling into the heavens, rivers running black with ash. Then, just as sudden, he saw hands shaping stone, chisels striking rhythm, sparks of fire casting light on faces, determined, patient, unyielding. The mountain showed him its memory. Not all of it, just fragments, enough to know it was more than rock. It had lived through empires. It had outlasted kings. It had watched humanity rise and break again. And yet it endured. Waiting, the whispers faded. The chamber stilled. Only his ragged breath filled the emptiness. He dragged himself upright, pressing one hand to the altar. The stone there was warm, almost pulsing like flesh, and for the first time, he heard a single voice rise above the chorus. It was deep, heavy, slow, not in words he knew, but he understood all the same. You are seen. The pilgrim staggered back, chest heaving. The walls fell silent, the glow dimmed, and the chamber returned to stillness. Yet the words clung to him, not imagined, not dreamt. The mountain had spoken, and it was waiting for more. Asterisk. The altar chamber lingered behind him like a half-remembered dream. The air carried its whispers even as silence fell again. And the pilgrim's ears rang as if the mountain's voice still hummed beneath his skin. He had a choice. He could turn back. The path behind him was clear, the carvings still faintly glowing, ready to guide him to the mouth of the valley where night air and freedom waited. But he did not turn. Something in that single phrase, "You are seen," rooted him deeper than fear. He felt as though a weight had been laid across his shoulders, not crushing, but purposeful. To stop here would be to betray whatever had called him inward. So he moved forward. The tunnel narrowed. The walls pressed close enough that his fingertips brushed them on either side, and the stone vibrated faintly as though alive with a low current. His lantern flame bent and swayed, though no wind moved. With each step downward, the air thickened, carrying a tang of minerals sharp on his tongue. Soon, the carvings thinned. Their patterns grew less human, less deliberate. Their shapes shifting from spirals into jagged slashes and layered grooves. It no longer felt like the work of hands. These were forms cut by time itself, or something deeper. As though the mountain's veins had carved its own symbols. And then the descent began. The floor sloped at first, then dropped sharply. Steps had been carved into the rock, narrow and uneven, winding down like the spine of some great beast. The pilgrim steadied himself against the wall, moving slowly, aware that one slip could carry him into darkness with no return. He counted steps, lost count, and still they descended. The further he went, the colder the air became, until his breath steamed in the lantern light. Yet with the cold came a faint hum, the same deep vibration he had heard in the chamber, now rising, stronger, steadier, as though he was being pulled closer to its heart. The stair ended in a cavern, vast, beyond measure. He stepped out, lantern raised. Its flame looked pitiful in the void, swallowed by shadows. Stalactites hung like teeth from the ceiling, dripping water that echoed in slow, steady rhythm. The ground was uneven, ridged with stone formations that caught and twisted the light. But it wasn't the stone that held him still. It was the river, a dark, glassy ribbon cut across the cavern floor, its surface still, yet shimmering faintly as though lit from beneath. The water glowed with a pale silver hue, not bright enough to illuminate, but alive enough to seem unnatural. It stretched into the cavern, disappearing into shadows on both ends, flowing from nowhere, flowing to nowhere. The pilgrim knelt at its edge. He dipped his fingers in. The water was ice-cold, burning against his skin. Yet it did not sting. Instead, it carried a sensation like memory, flashes of sound and image not his own. A mother's voice, soothing, a child, a sword-striking shield, a flock of birds lifting at dawn, all gone before he could grasp them. He jerked his hand back, trembling. Droplets clung to his skin, glowing faintly before sinking into his flesh and vanishing as though absorbed. The hum deepened. The hum deepened. From across the cavern, the shadows stirred. At first, he thought it was his lantern throwing tricks, but then he saw them clearly, shapes moving at the far edge of the river. Human shapes, figures tall and robed, faceless in the dim light. They stood silently, unmoving, as if carved from the cavern's stone. Yet he felt their eyes upon him, even if no faces were there to hold them. He froze, heart hammering. The figures did not move closer. They simply waited, silent guardians at the edge of a silver stream, watching as though measuring his worth, and though fear pressed heavy in his chest. A strange calm followed. He realized The mountain was not only alive, it was not only watching, it was filled. Every chamber, every wall, every flow of water and vein of stone carried echoes of all who had touched it. It was not one voice, it was 1,000, a chorus of everything that had ever sought its depths. And now he was among them. The pilgrim tightened his grip on the lantern and took a step toward the river's crossing. The guardians did not move. The hum grew louder. The air itself seemed to hold its breath. He understood, without words, that the test had only begun. The pilgrim stood at the river's edge, the lantern flame trembling in his grip. The faceless figures across the silver stream held their silence, still as carved stone. The river did not flow like water should. Its surface barely moved, smooth as polished glass. Yet its glow shifted faintly. His reflection shimmered back, but it was not quite his own. The face in the silver-held lines, older than his eyes, shadowed with sorrows he did not yet know. When he blinked, the reflection changed a boy's face, wide-eyed with hope, then a woman's with hair loose in the wind, then an old man's lips pressed tight as if against pain. The river showed lives that were not his, yet lived through him in that instant. He pulled back. Dizzy, the guardians across the water shifted. Not much, just the faintest tilt of their heads, as though marking his hesitation. Their stillness pressed heavier than any spoken word. He understood. He was meant to cross. The pilgrim rose, drew in a steadying breath, and stepped forward. The first boot touched the water. It did not sink. Instead, the silver surface rippled beneath his weight, hard and soft at once, bearing him like stone, yet moving like liquid. He took another step, the lantern light scattering across the glowing ripples. The air around him thickened, humming so loud it seemed to press against his chest. Halfway across, the river struck Dot, not with force, not with waves, but with memory. It poured into him, visions sharper than dreams, heavier than thought. He was kneeling in a field of ash, hands raw from digging graves for those who would never rise. He was standing on a cliff with the wind tearing at his cloak as he sent a prayer to gods that never answered. He was clutching a child against his chest, weeping as the walls of a burning city crumbled behind him. Each vision tore at him, sank into him as though the river demanded he bear them all. His knees buckled. The lantern nearly fell from his grasp, but he kept moving, step by step, each heavier than the last. He carried the weight of those lives. His chest heaved, his vision blurred, yet his feet did not falter at last. His boots touched the far shore. The visions broke like a wave pulling back into the sea. The hum softened. The river stilled. Glass moved once more. He stood, trembling. His mind swam with echoes of lives not his own. Yet now they felt bound to him, scars pressed into his soul. The faceless guardians stirred. They stepped aside as one, clearing a path deeper into the cavern. Their robes brushed the ground with no sound, their presence neither hostile nor kind. They had not barred him. They had measured him and found him. Acceptable. The pilgrim lowered his lantern and bowed his head. Then, gathering what little strength remained, he followed the path they revealed. Beyond the guardians, the cavern narrowed into another passage, its walls marked not with carvings, but with natural veins of crystal, glowing faintly from within. The deeper he walked, the brighter they grew, casting fractured light across his face. The hum returned, softer now, like a heartbeat, steady and low. It pulled him onward, further down, toward a place where even the echoes of humanity could not reach. The mountain was not done with him yet. The passage narrowed until he could stretch out both arms and brush the walls with his fingertips. Unlike the rough stone above, these walls were alive with crystal. Some ran like rivers frozen mid-flow, veins of translucent quartz threading through the rock. Others jutted in jagged clusters, edges sharp, catching the light of his lantern and scattering it into fractured rainbows across his face. But he soon realized he no longer needed the lantern. The crystals themselves glowed, faint at first, then stronger the deeper he went. Their light was not steady. It pulsed, slow, rhythmic, like breath, like a heartbeat. He dimmed the lantern flame until it was no more than a small ember, then snuffed it out entirely. Darkness should have swallowed him, but the crystal's glow remained, soft and constant, guiding his way. With every step, the hum in the stone deepened. It pressed against his skin, sank into his bones, echoed through the chambers of his chest. He could not tell if the sound came from around him or from inside him. The air thickened with warmth, carrying a faint metallic tense. His tongue tasted iron. Then he heard it, not whispers this time, not the voices of countless lives. A single sound, a slow, deliberate thud, reverberating through the crystals. He placed his palm against the wall, and it vibrated beneath, his skin in time with the beat. The mountain had a heart, and he was being led to it. The corridor twisted and sloped downward. The crystals grew denser, brighter, their light washing over him until shadows no longer clung to his steps. Some clusters shimmered like captured starlight, others burned with faint red, as though molten embers were trapped within. He caught glimpses of movement in their depths, shapes like faces, hands, wings, all shifting when he looked too long, gone when he blinked. That the hum rose. The heartbeat quickened. He stumbled, once knees weak, under the weight of it. It was no longer sound. It was a force. Every thud struck through his ribs, rattled his skull, pulled at his very thoughts. Still, he pressed on. At last, the passage widened. The crystals fell back, giving way to a cavern vast and hollow. Its walls shimmered with veins of light converging toward the center, where a great mass loomed. It was not stone, it was not crystal, it was something between the two. A colossal heart of rock and light, suspended within the cavern as though grown from the mountain itself. It pulsed slowly, each beat sending tremors through the ground, each glow casting waves of silver across the walls. The pilgrim fell to his knees. He could not move. He could not breathe. The sheer weight of its presence pressed down on him until he felt smaller than dust. Then the voice came, not whispers, not echoes, not fragments. One voice, vast and ancient, rising from the heart itself, filling the cavern, filling him. You walk in my veins. The pilgrim bowed his head, hands trembling against the stone floor. His lips moved, but no words came. You carry what I have carried. The heartbeat surged, shaking the cavern walls. The crystals blazed with light. You will decide what endures. The words carved into him, deeper than memory, deeper than bone. The mountain was not only alive, it was asking. It was asking. The pilgrim's body trembled beneath the mountain's voice. The sound was not sound. It shook the marrow of his bones, stretched the limits of his thoughts, reverberated through every breath he drew. He had wandered, seeking peace, but now peace was impossible. The mountain had fixed its gaze on him, not with eyes, but with a presence so vast it left no escape. The crystal cavern pulsed with its heart. Each beat sent waves of light racing along the walls, through the veins, across the ceiling so high it was lost in shadows. The pilgrim's breath synced with the rhythm without his willing it, his chest rising and falling in time with the mountain's throb. Then came the voice again. All who come, come bearing weight. He shut his eyes. The words pressed into him like a chisel to stone. You are no different. You carry grief. You carry longing. You carry silence. His mind reeled. The mountain spoke not in accusation, but in knowing. It was as though it had reached into his past and pulled his hidden burdens into the open. The night spent alone. The prayers unanswered. The ache that drove him from his village and up into the wilderness. He could not deny it. Why me? The words left him raw, cracked, carried more in breath then voice. The cavern fell still. For a moment, only the low throb of the heart remained, echoing through silence. Then the reply came, "Because you listen." The crystals flared. The river of veins burned brighter. Images struck him in a sudden torrent, visions flowing faster than thought. He saw men cutting stone from the mountainside, their bodies bent beneath the weight. He saw temples raised, towers of worship reaching toward the sky. He saw armies marching through valleys, banners torn by wind, blood soaking into soil that had once grown wheat. He saw children laughing in fields of flowers, only to vanish in storms of fire. 1,000 lives, 1,000 endings, carried by the mountain's memory, and threaded through it all. Silence, the silence of those who had not listened, who had built, taken, fought, forgotten, leaving only scars upon the stone. Now the mountain waited. Endurance is not enough. The voice rumbled. Choice must be made. What will remain when you are gone? What shall be carried in these veins, and what shall be lost? The pilgrim fell forward, pressing his palms to the ground as though it might steady the storm inside him. How could he choose? He was a wanderer, a man with nothing but his sandals, his cloak. The lantern he still clutched with a white-knuckled grip. He bore no crown, commanded no armies, held no wisdom carved on tablets or taught by masters. He was one man, yet the mountain had chosen him. He raised his head slowly, eyes fixed on the great heart pulsing before him. The question was not for kings or priests. It was not for armies or scholars. It was for anyone who would listen. And he was listening. Asterisk. The cavern trembled with every beat of the mountain's heart. Light pulsed through the veins of crystal, washing the walls in waves of silver and red. The air pressed heavy against the pilgrim's chest, as though the mountain leaned closer with every breath. Waiting, the voice came again, slower now, deep as thunder rolling through earth. What shall endure? The pilgrim's lips parted, but no words came. His throat was dry, his mind drowning beneath the visions the mountain had shown him. Empires risen and fallen, fires consuming cities, children's laughter swallowed by silence. He had nothing to give it, nothing but himself. He set the lantern down upon the stone floor. Its small flame flickered weakly against the glow of the cavern. He pressed both hands against the ground, feeling the steady rhythm of the mountain thrum beneath his palms. "I cannot build," he whispered, voice hoarse. "I cannot command. I have no wisdom to carve into stone." The heartbeat surged, shaking dust from the ceiling, but he did not falter. His voice grew stronger, pulled from the marrow of his being. but I can remember. I can carry what others have left. I can hold it so it does not vanish. I will not let it be lost. Silence followed, for a breath, for two. He feared his words had been swallowed whole by the vastness. Then the mountain stirred. The crystals flared so bright he covered his eyes. Yet the light pierced through his lids. The heartbeat thundered, not crushing now, but lifting. The cavern filled with a sound like wind over endless plains, waves upon an eternal shore. And through it, the voice spoke once more. Then you are mine. His body felt weightless, suspended, as though his very soul had been lifted from his bones. 1,000 voices poured into him at once, not as visions, not as torment, but as song. Every life the mountain had ever held, every whisper etched into stone, every breath, every sorrow, every joy, they moved through him like water through a vessel. He wept, not from pain, but from the immensity of it. When the light dimmed, he lay upon the cavern floor. His lantern was gone, its small flame folded into the mountain's glow. The heart still pulsed, steady, eternal, but something within him had changed. He could still feel the weight of those voices, not crushing, but woven into him. The mountain had given him its memory. He would walk the world carrying not only his own life, but the echo of countless others, enduring as long as his body would. The cavern stilled. The hum softened, fading back into the slow rhythm of stone. The mountain had spoken. The mountain had chosen. The pilgrim rose. His steps, unsteady but certain, and turned back toward the passage that would lead him. At last, upward, he had entered seeking silence. He left carrying eternity, and behind him, the mountain waited still, waited still.